Is we're missing what it feels like to have a society that is centered in compassion, that is centered in, and compassion is a muscle. So people often say to me, like, what about starving children or the environment or pollution or all these other things? And it's compassion is a muscle that just keeps growing. So by exercising compassion towards animals, we're exercising that muscle that can grow to be more empathetic, more compassionate to all beings. It's very instrumental, in fact, to transforming our society into a better one.
Welcome to the Better Life for Animals podcast, where we amplify the voices of animal advocates, sanctuaries, and changemakers working toward a kinder, more compassionate world. Through powerful stories and expert insights, we shine a light on the efforts to rescue, protect, and advocate for animals. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. Every follower helps us reach more people. And support animal sanctuaries. Enjoy the conversation.
Leah Garcés is a storyteller, bridge builder, and visionary leader, reimagining our relationship with animals and the food we eat. For more than 2 decades, she's worked alongside farmers, advocates, and changemakers to end factory farming and create a kinder, more sustainable food system. Formerly president of Mercy for Animals, Leah is the author of Grilled and Transformation and the creator of the award-winning short film, Henrietta. Her life's work centers on transformation, helping people move from opposition to collaboration, from exploration to empathy. Half Colombian and half American, Leah's journey has been featured by the New York Times, the Washington Post, Vice, and Vox. Through courage, honesty, and heart, she invites us all to imagine a future where every being can thrive. Leah, welcome to the podcast. What an honor to have you.
Well, thank you. It's so good to see you again, and I can't wait for our conversation.
Thank you. You have spent more than 2 decades leading campaigns to transform the global food system. So what was that moment when it became clear to you that factory farming had to be the central focus of your life's work?
Yeah, it was actually when I had my first son. He's 18 now. So I had been working on all animal issues, from stray dogs in India to working horses in Colombia to bear bile farming in China. And I had been traveling before I was 30. I had been to 30 different countries, visiting all the ways that animals are harmed and suffer through the hands of humans. And when I had my first son, my focus became very sharp because anytime I was spending away from him, I thought it needs to be the most impactful. And it really brought my focus into front vision. And I thought, like, what is the cause? What are the animals that are suffering the most that we can do something about? And after visiting all these countries and seeing all these ways that animals suffer, it was very clear to me that farmed animals are the ones that need me the most. And if I was going to spend my life, my time away from my family, dedicating myself to a cause, it had to be to farmed animals because of the numbers, because of the tractability, meaning an issue we can actually change, something we can do something about, and because of the acuteness of the suffering. And so 18 years ago, I became fully committed only to farmed animals and changing the farm and food system that we all live under globally.
I've read all of your books, and so I want to start with Grilled, where I love how you turn adversaries into allies in the chicken industry. So what's your view of farmers and companies? How do you shift that as you begin to, you're sitting at their kitchen tables instead of just protesting? I mean, they are people, right? And I
Mhm.
think you really underscore how they're trapped in this system in some ways almost as much as the animals themselves. So how do we reconcile that?
Yeah, I think beginning of my advocacy, I really thought farmers were the enemy. I thought they're the ones abusing animals, they're the ones signing up to this. And the funny thing is, I had never actually met a farmer, a factory farmer in particular, a farmer that is raising animals under this system. And so in 2014, I had the opportunity to do so, and that was Craig Watts in North Carolina. And that changed the trajectory of how I view not just farmers, but how to make change. And I realized that farmers, especially in the United States, so 98% of all chicken farmers are under contracts from big poultry companies like Tyson and Purdue and Marjack and Mount Air. And they don't have a lot of choice and they're stuck in debt and they struggle with that debt and they can't get out of it. And once I realized that, I realized they are as trapped as the chickens in some ways, and they want out just like the chickens, and that they were unlikely allies, people that I needed to collaborate with instead of fight against.
You know, I know that we're under having challenges with our current political system, and I think about the children. I saw a post you just did, and I think I've done that post as well, where you talk about the death of that boy, Duvan Perez, and
Mhm.
how I don't think people realize who's
Mhm.
working in those factories. And I
Yeah.
wonder sometimes, you know, I know people care, but I love that, and I love that you bring it up. I love that and that you are not afraid to be upset and angry and let people know that this is just completely unacceptable. Because talk about having no agency.
Yeah, that story is really important to tell. So there was a boy named Duvan Perez, and he was working in a Marjack chicken slaughterhouse. He had been hired, but he was a child. And he used paperwork from someone else, but the company didn't really care, didn't check. He obviously was not an adult, he was a child. And he was working what is known as, it's called the lavada, which is the night shift for the cleaning station, where they clean the fragments and the bone and the pieces of the slaughterhouse that need to be cleaned so that they can run the shift again in the morning. And it's reserved for the people living in the shadows, truly. So many people who don't have the correct paperwork are working during that time because nobody else wants that job. It's the worst job. And as it turns out, there's children working illegally, illegal child labor happening in the Levada shifts. And Duvan was one of them. And he got pulled into the conveyor belt and he was killed. And when it finally went to the Department of Labor and it was looked at, they only received $200,000 worth of fines, which is it's appalling because that's likely less than an executive makes in a year. This boy's life was worth $200,000 of fine. It's nothing to this company, nothing at all. They received not even, I wouldn't even call it a slap on the wrist, and they carry on. And it turned out that the Department of Labor during this time, they found that 8 states had illegal child labor happening in chicken slaughterhouses. And a lot of these companies that fine, those lawsuits are now coming up. So you're seeing it in the news a lot. So they're coming, the court cases are being settled. But that's happening at all in our country, that mostly immigrant children are in these dangerous, disgusting, abusive nighttime slaughterhouse factories, and some of them are dying and getting injured. It's appalling that it's happening at all. And I think every American would care about that. I don't care what side of the political, you know, path you're on, but no one thinks that child labor in a dangerous setting is okay. And the companies know it's happening. They do. And they also know the penalty for it is so minor, it's not worth their effort fixing.
What always comes up for me is what can, you know, the individual do, the person that goes, well, I can't do anything about that. But the answer is yes, you can always not participate. And
Yeah.
it's just as simple as that. I know you talk a lot about, you know, what did this animal go through to land on your plate in the form of a sandwich? And I know you struggle with this too, so that's why we're talking, because it just sometimes you're just like, how can you not care? Where's the disconnect? And yet the disconnect is real. It's real here. It's real in so many other areas of human life, of human existence. So I know we spend a lot of time trying to unhook that psychological, you know, lock that people just don't want to maybe turn their eye. I know we've tried, you know, you wouldn't do this to your dog, so why would you do this to your pig? Why would you do this to a pig? Why would you do this to a chicken? And yet people do that. So that's why I know, just like you, I spend most of my day thinking about this and
Mhm.
thinking, what is that magic phrase that's going to shift, our consciousness? And I know it's possible, so I hang in there. But I just, I wonder sometimes what we can do, or what anyone can do when they're feeling, surely this story must just upset, like you said, everyone. So what can they do to make sure that something like this isn't happening?
I think it's a really good point. I believe most people are good and they're coming from a place of I'm trying to do my best. And what's hard is what is the norm around us.
Hmm.
So if you are surrounded by others who are also not purchasing differently, not eating differently, not talking about this differently, you are unlikely to speak up. That's just the way humans work. Human psychology is that social confirmation, like really being like everyone around us, is really important to us. I read a book called Change by Damon Santola, and the key thing we can do is to spark change in our community and build a network, a cluster of people who also care and make that so strong. So, if you can find a way in your church, in your school, in your book club, in wherever, and you start really building community that cares about that, that it can be so powerful and so strong, and it can make such a difference. The problem is when we do it alone sometimes it can feel really bad. We can feel really isolated and we can go back. People will go back to the old ways of what everyone else is doing around us. And I had somebody once say to me, like, why didn't I go vegan sooner? And they said, well, when I was growing up, I knew it was wrong, but I looked around me as a kid and everybody was doing it. So I thought it can't be that wrong if everybody else is doing it, but everybody else is thinking that. So I think sparking change right in your community, right where you can make a difference and building strength and knowledge right around you can be very powerful for cultural change. It can be actually one of the only ways culture changes. People don't really change, especially with issues like this that are really big shifts in our culture. They don't change because an influencer told them or, a Hollywood celebrity told them. They change because the people around them are changing. So if you can influence your neighbors, that's really effective and really important.
We just had a sanctuary summit, our first one, and one of our speakers was Daniel Hanisch, who I know you know of LEAP.
Hmm.
And I'm very excited about this because this is the area where I feel we can possibly have some real impact with children, young people who, with once again, with that group like you're describing, they can know that it's cool to
Yeah.
be kind,
Yeah.
and learn that as a young person because they're going to be the ones that take it to the next level, I believe. So we're talking about having a summit with children in the future because I think that children, and that's why, as you know, I've written children's book, as I know you have as well. They don't have this block. We're not innately like that, right? We have to learn that, and yet we have all of these forces as we speak. These forces are doubling down on, this is what we want you to eat. And it's all of, and that's when I struggle. It's like, well, that's just cruel. That's just about the profit motive, and that's just about control and domination, which
Hmm.
want to, there's only so much one person can do, but, I think when we just don't participate and then once again, we show other people that it doesn't, I'm thriving as a human without any, putting any of that on in my plate or wearing it or hopefully not, participating in any cruelty.
Yeah, I think the LEAP program is really powerful because what it's doing is bringing together a community of kids who can reinforce this belief. Because one of the most isolating things is to be a kid who cares about this and you don't have anybody like you around you. So you're going to either continue and be quiet about it, or you might actually conform to whatever happening around you. So what we're doing is creating these very strong bridges and strong foundation for these kids to continue doing this by creating a community where they can maintain this belief and get stronger in it through the reinforcement of people around them. And I think that's really important, especially at this age. I think most kids around middle school strongly believe like animals should have a good life, and something happens around high school where they start getting a lot of information that adults get and they start switching. And it's a key point right around eighth or ninth grade, I think, where an interjection is really needed in that upper middle school, early high school, to stop kids from conforming to what the social norm is, which is ignoring factory farming, ignoring the abuse of farmed animals, and ignoring the harm that factory farming does.
I also think it helps the sanctuaries themselves, because so many sanctuaries, as you know, they struggle. They just don't have enough resources to keep it going half the time. And to be able to bring in the community and to offer education, which is, something people are willing to even pay for. I think that if we can get LEAP in every sanctuary or something like it throughout the country and the world, then we are on our way to reminding the world that these animals deserve to live on their own terms, and they're not just some static thing sitting in a box that we go and visit and then we come home and go live life as usual.
Absolutely. That's right. Yeah.
Well, I also love your book, Transformation. I mean, transformation is transformative. I love how you highlight, farmers and communities who are finding pathways out of factory farming and into more humane and sustainable livelihoods. So what patterns do you see in these people and places that are really successfully making that leap?
Well, I think that what surprised me the most working with farmers is how willing they were to share their struggle and how many of them are struggling. And the majority of American poultry farmers, for example, are living at or below the poverty line. And they're trapped in a cycle of debt and struggle. And the thing that they needed was for me to listen and be curious and not point fingers, but to try to just listen to their sorrow, to their difficulties, to their challenges. And after that, we could come up maybe with starting to carve up a roadmap for farmers to get out of that. But the first part of connecting with these American farmers is curiosity, open-mindedness, and listening to their struggles.
You're listening to Better Life for Animals podcast. Our mission is to amplify the voices of animal advocates, sanctuaries, and change makers working toward a kinder, more compassionate world. But we can't do it alone. We need your help. First of all, go ahead and subscribe to this channel wherever you're watching or listening. And then get involved by visiting betterlifeforanimals.com. That's betterlifeforanimals.com. Be sure to check out our blog, learn more about incredible sanctuaries, and explore our book section, where 100% of net proceeds from book sales are donated to sanctuaries. Every action you take helps to make a difference. And remember, subscribe to this channel. And now, back to the show.
For listeners who are not farmers but want to be part of this movement, what is the most impactful thing that like an ordinary person can do to support a transformation of the food system in their own communities?
Well, you can go to the Transformation Project, which is
Okay.
thetransformationproject.org, which I founded. And I founded it under Mercy for Animals, and it continues to thrive there. And it's doing a great job at transforming 10 to 8 farmers a year, and also transform what Americans think of factory farming through the story of these farmers. So it's not just on the ground transforming farmers and getting them to move from chicken and pigs and dairy to specialty crops like mushrooms and microgreens, but it's also getting their voices elevated, telling the stories from rural America of how factory farming is hurting American farmers. And it's a fantastic platform. There's lots of stories of farmers on the website, on Instagram. And I highly recommend that you be a part of that movement and help farmers in that way by joining Transformation.
Excellent. Well, in Transformation, you talk about your Henrietta story, and I'm wondering if just quickly you would give us the story of Henrietta because it's such a beautiful piece of work.
Yeah, I'm the executive producer for an animation called Henrietta Finds a Nest, and it has been at 25 film festivals and had 7 or 8 awards. And it's a 7-minute short that tells a true story of a chicken that I rescued and went from farm to my family, became a part of my family. I was working with a farmer in West Texas, sorry, and he was trying to transition into hemp. And it was during COVID. And what happened was many of the chickens didn't make it to slaughter. And they were supposed to be taken off, and there was a problem at the slaughterhouse, and they got left behind. And there were a lot of them in poor, poor shape. And the farmer called me. He was actively farming, and he said, "Look, if you want to take a few of these chickens and take them home, I'm not going to say anything." So I took a couple home. I took 3 home, and I drove from East Texas all the way to Atlanta, and 2 of them didn't make it out the week, but one of them did, and her name was Henrietta. And for many people, that was like the year of COVID, but for my family, it was the year of Henrietta. And she bonded particularly with my daughter, who was in first grade at the time, had no other friends because she was isolated. And it was so beautiful seeing Henrietta and Andrea form this bond, just like a dog or a cat. And Henrietta got to live 4 seasons with us, which is a miracle for a broiler chicken because they are bred to grow so big so fast. They often die of heart attacks. And in that time, we remembered, I don't know, it was the time of COVID. So everything was very insular and small and inward, but she helped us like look out and be wondrous again and be joyful. Everything from her, like seeing what she liked to eat and how she interacted with the cat and where she'd like to sleep. And, she started laying eggs and like we didn't know what to do with them. And she was just such a joyful, beautiful being. And I'm someone who's advocated for chickens my entire adult life. And even me didn't realize the depth of emotion, the kind of personality, and the love and joy that could come from just one chicken. And there's 9 billion that are trapped in factory farms. So it was a joyous moment. It was a deep and profound experience for my family and I. And we made an animation out of it that's been award winning.
My grandson laughs every time we colored Henrietta on the Roomba.
Oh,
That
yes.
was hysterical.
Yes, that
Yeah.
is Henrietta learned to ride the Roomba. My daughter taught her how to ride the skateboard. And when I worked at Mercy for Animals, the creative folks, Matt Shear there, they would take those videos and they turn them into the animation that you see today, working with Mighty Oak Studios, who are wonderful. And it was a beautiful project, a joyful project. And the work we do can sometimes be really disheartening and sad. So for me, and I know for the team at Mercy for Animals that worked on it and Mighty Oaks, it was just a beautiful project that brought a lot of joy to us as advocates. And it gave us joy to put out this like joy of what we're missing by not connecting with animals in this way.
That's always the question, isn't it? It's like showing the hard realities versus showing what's possible and, showing both. I know people say they're turned away from the dark realities, and yet if they don't know about it, how are they going to change? And at the same time, any book I've ever written or any, time I ever get too dark, I'm always reminded that's not working. They're not going to hear. They will
Yeah.
not be listening to that.
I
Yeah.
find that, very hard, the balance of the reality, the facts versus what we're missing by not living a life of compassion. That to me is the balance that the dance advocates have to do. the why, and then what we're missing. Like we're doing this because 99% of all animals are kept in these horrific conditions, and they're just as worthy as our dogs or cats of joy. But the what, the what we're missing is we're missing what it feels like to have a society that is centered in compassion, that is centered in, and compassion is a muscle. So when people often say to me, like, what about starving children or the environment or pollution or all these other things? And it's compassion is a muscle that just keeps growing. So by exercising compassion towards animals, we're exercising that muscle that can grow to be more empathetic, more compassionate to all beings. It's very instrumental, in fact, to transforming our society into a better one.
You always say everything so beautifully, Leah. I want to talk now about the new food pyramid, which feels more like an advertisement for the meat and dairy industry and not anything about preventing heart disease or diabetes. And of course, it's also unbelievably cruel. So for ethical vegans who are like myself, and I know you, are feeling devastated and angry about seeing meat elevated to the top of the food pyramid, what do you think is the most strategic response? Is it protest? Is it policy advocacy? Is it coalition building with health professionals? I'm sure it's all of that. But it just feels like it's a vice that's just landing on us. And I know we're going to get through it.
Yeah.
But right now things feel pretty dark.
I think first of all is to delegitimize it as a valid guideline is very important. So I think there's been a lot of information, but it's important for people to educate themselves. This is not a guideline that has been written by an independent scientific committee. There was one, and that one was hundreds of pages long, and then it was condensed into 10 pages. And there was a secret meeting where 8 out of the 9 people on the panel there had financial ties to the meat and dairy industry, and that's the resulting guidelines we have today. So I think, unfortunately, we cannot rely on this guideline or our government to be giving us advice on what to eat and what not to eat, which is sad, and it shouldn't be that way. And so that's the first thing, is delegitimize it. It is not a valid food pyramid. It's the worst one we've had so far, I would say, because of the heavy emphasis on red meat, on full fat dairy, on saturated fat, all things that the American Heart Association, the American Cancer Society, and the World Health Organization are saying the opposite of. They're saying do less of those things. So for health, which is what the food pyramid is supposed to be about, it's doing the opposite of what it's supposed to. And that's simply because it is about corporate power, corporate money, and control of the money and the power. That's one thing. The part that I think we might be able to do something about is maybe in our local food systems. Like, I think that I have seen in my own community where my own school, my elementary school near my house where my kids went to, they've got Morning Star veggie nuggets there, right? They've got, and we're about to see, for example, thanks to a bill that just came through, kids are going to have the option of plant-based milks in schools. So there's definitely some options and alternatives in your community to advocate for changes. There's flexibility in the system if you advocate for it, if you demand it. So in your school lunch, you could have plant-based nuggets that still meet the protein demand but aren't coming from a factory farm. You could have plant-based milks that don't come from factory farms but come from something from plant-based. So it's just going to be put on the people more and communities to advocate in their communities, in their school districts, to change the options right in their cafeterias. That is possible. People have been working on that, have been successful at that. And I don't think that's going to change. And I think we can still keep doing that.
Very good. Well, I went to dinner on Saturday at Crossroads. I live in Las Vegas and we have a Crossroads. And I'm always
Crossroads in Las Vegas?
Yes, you need to
Lucky
come.
you.
Let me know. I am always happy, and I always get there nervous, and I'm always happy to see that the place is pretty much full. It's full on Thanksgiving. It was full Saturday night because we've had a lot of restaurants here locally, quite sadly, that have closed.
Yeah.
And yet they managed to keep going. So I feel like there's there's hope when I see things like that. And then when I read something like, there's 80 million vegans on the planet, that is a large number. And there is, where I've always been told that, if we're only 2% right now, if we could get it to 10% or some number closer, then things could start to tip.
Hmm.
And I know you're working on our, what's the most effective way in the future to, create a more compassionate world. So I just wonder what are your ideas for, what the future could look like?
Yeah, I think it's been interesting. I was just in Europe. I was in Spain, and I went to Berlin this summer too. What I've noticed in Europe that is different than the United States is that plant-based options are integrated into omnivore restaurants much more frequently. And there, I'm seeing more success of the products. In Germany, for example, is one of the countries that has stabilized in terms of their meat consumption is not going up. And I think that's important to pay attention to. I think it's important to pay attention to when we go into the vegan only, and then it kind of feels like an exclusive club that can maybe make the like price for entry can be scary to some people who might be curious. So I am a person who is not against the kind of I personally put my dollar at to vegan restaurants. Like that's where I like to put my money and my time. So I go to the local ones in Atlanta. But I think it's important that we work on integrating vegan menu options into every restaurant so that it normalizes it, so that people think it's normal and they can try it without a high price of entry. So I don't think we should be against restaurants integrating and having some vegan options, but not all vegan options, while supporting the vegan only options and vegan only restaurants. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And, I've had discussions about this just like this. It's like when they hand you a vegan menu, which they do for me, then no one else at the table even wants to try it. Whereas
Right.
if it were just like, it's just it's a chickpea and lentil
Right.
bowl. I'm just
Right.
making something up. It's not something that anyone couldn't eat. And you just put it as, item
Exactly.
number two under category three. It doesn't have to be an exclusive.
Yeah. There's a
Because
lot of
I'm with you. It's like
information there.
whatever works is what I want. Whatever, less is more. I'm personally not of the belief that we need to be eliminating anyone who isn't seeing it 100%. And I wish they all did, but I know they don't. So if you can try it and you go, you know what, I liked that. Or when people come to my house, they know what they're getting. And
Yeah.
they still come.
Yeah, it's
You
like
know,
menu architecture and menu design are really important and they can make a big difference. So there have been ample studies that show when you put the word vegan in a different section in the menu, those products are less successful than if you put the items in a menu that are integrated and they don't have the word vegan. So let's say there's a vegan option that says vegan burrito versus Southwest Sizzler burrito, and it just has the items. Like you're more likely to choose that and go, "Ooh, that sounds yummy," because it's got a creative title and it's delicious sounding. So there's a lot of studies that have been done on how to get people to eat less animals, which is better for the environment, better for our health, better for animals. And there's been success in that. So I think we have to pay attention. We can't ignore that. There's the vegans are going to find it, right? We're going to find it because we're ingredient readers. Like it's like people who are gluten free or, allergic to something. We're like, we will find what we need to find. You don't need to point it out to us. We know what it is. So what you're trying to do is get people to the price of entry is low and the reward is high. It's delicious, it's normalized, it doesn't feel weird. What you want to do is normalize the option.
I know I'm always going to restaurants going, well, I'm vegan to the waiter or
Right.
waitress and saying, and what have you got for me? What can you do for me?
Yeah.
Or what has this got in it? And then I have no problem, when they want a review or they want a suggestion, I simply put more vegan options.
Yep.
And I tell my friends,
Great.
because I don't want to not have friends, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, don't worry about me. There will be something. I will find it. I
Yeah.
will eat that. Do not, I'm the least of your worries.
Yeah, exactly.
I heard your interview with Rich Roll, who I also follow and love. And I think this was back in COVID times when you were talking about you were having lunch with friends and they were all debating on whether or not to order the octopus. And you had to just get up and go to, just have to excuse yourself because those are things that happen to all of us. And it's so
Yeah.
nice to hear. I mean, I would never think that people would, try that with you.
Yeah.
And yet they do. That
Yeah.
it's so interesting how people know they know how I feel, they know how I stand, and they will then say something like, "Would you like to try my eggplant parmesan?" Or, after having just said I don't eat dairy.
Yeah, and I think it's a reminder of how actually difficult it is to understand this subject because people who care about us, people who are intelligent, people who are engaged in the world around them, like they're paying attention to politics, and yet they're still missing the mark on this. They still struggle with understanding, which seems very obvious to us, like anything with a face. I don't want anything that comes from them or from their bodies, like at all. And yet, again and again, people will be like, "Oh, can you try this? Can you do this? Can you? No, that has eggs. No, that has cheese. No, that." But it's a reminder to us about how normalized this is, how integrated it is to our culture, and this is a big challenge for our society to overcome. It's not, and to be patient with people, to be kind with people, to be empathetic with the change that we're asking them to make. It's not easy, uh, and and it's not easy because it's not normalized. So the best thing we can do is make it tasty, make it normalized, like add options that seem like familiar foods, things like that.
I What do you think 2026 is going to look like for us?
Hmm. Well, I think that we're doubling down on some of the corporate work. So some of these companies have been committing to cage-free eggs and are falling short on that. So I would say the most important thing we're doing right now as a movement is we need to uh, get these companies to fulfill the very basic commitments they've made, which is to only supply cage-free eggs. Many of them are going back on that. So, and their commitment was for either 25 or 26. So some of them have missed their commitment or they're about to miss it. And if we have companies that can't even commit to let hens out of their cages, how can we trust them at all to make any commitments for animals? So I think it's fundamentally a critical year for getting the movement to focus on cage-free commitments.
Very good. Well, I have really enjoyed this conversation and I hope you will come back. I know you're shedding a light on things, you're leading the way, and we would love to hear anything that's new and anything that we can do to support you at any time, Leah. Please reach out. And before we go, please let us know how we can help you and support you and find you.
Well, I encourage you to follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn, and you can hear about my journey. Right now, I left MFA Mercy for Animals in November, and right now I have a research grant to look at what is the white space in the movement, what are the things that are missing and needed in our movement to really accelerate progress for farmed animals. So you'll see in my Instagram, if you follow me, I'm going to be touching on that. I'm going to be exploring issues, and probably by summer, I'll have some announcements to make about what I'm doing next.
Okay, well, maybe we'll have you back then.
That would be great.
Okay, excellent. Well, this has been the wonderful Leah Garcés, and I'm Cheryl Moss. This is Better Life for Animals. And if you've enjoyed today's conversation, I hope you'll like and subscribe so that we can create a better life for animals.
Thank you for joining us on the Better Life for Animals podcast. Together, we can create a world where all beings are treated with dignity, respect, and care. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening. It helps us reach more people and spread awareness about the incredible work happening in animal sanctuaries. You can also share this episode with friends and fellow advocates to keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep speaking up, taking action, and making a difference for the animals.